Arafat Day and Eid al-Kabir in advance. And now to business news. On business news, oil palm growers in Nigeria call for renewed commitment to harness the potential of the sector. Details on this segment with Joy Uzo.
Welcome to Business News. Oil palm growers have continued to impress on the federal government to revitalize oil palm cultivation in Nigeria, which they noted is being relegated to the background. Available data show that the processing of palm fruits used to be the most important activity carried out in Nigeria, with the country leading as world producer of palm oil and a major exporter of the product. In view of this, farmers of the product said that palm oil remains an essential commodity as an industrial raw material that can turn around the fortune of Nigeria if maximum attention is given to the sector. Records show that the current domestic production of palm oil stands at 970,000 metric tons per annum, with the demand put at 2.7 million metric tons yearly.
We discovered that in other countries, commodity like oil palm cannot be left for the rural farmers. Oil palm is a sustainable commodity, and it requires government support. Call us on a meeting. We will tell you, government, if you do this, do that, oil palm will support the economy, and they will see it clear. We still need them to use us, the farmers, to decide the kind of equipment they will bring. Than going on their own, they bring some of these equipments that are not well serving to us.
And to review the capital market performance for last week, the Nigerian Stock Exchange recorded the first gain for the week, and it ended with increase in market capitalization by 236 billion naira last Friday. The market growth was due to price appreciation recorded by Dangote Cement, which led the gainers chart with 14 naira to close at 220 naira per share. Our general review show a total turnover of 1.147 billion shares, worth 12.546 billion naira, and 16,649 deals were traded last week by investors on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. The NSE All-Share Index and market capitalization depreciated by 0.51% to close the week at 35,266.29 and 12.875 trillion naira. Similarly, all other indices finished lower with the exception of the NSE Premium, NSE Lotus 2 and NSE Industrial Goods indices that rose by 0.59%, 0.23% and 1.29%, while the NSE SM Index closed flat. The financial services industry led the activity chart with 891.785 million shares valued at 8.251 billion naira, traded in 9,187 deals, thus contributing 77.78% and 65.77% to the total equity turnover volume and value. We'll keep you abreast with latest closing figures as trading takes off this Monday from where it left off last Friday. With that, we wrap up business news. Many thanks for watching. I am Joy Uzo.
Thank you very much, Joy, for the business package on Good Morning Nigeria. Next for us now, we'll take a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers in our review session. All right, Femi and I, of course, will alternate in taking the papers that we have. Femi, there are a number of stories that are common to the front pages of the papers today. Politics inevitably is there. And also news out of Ibadan. That's the capital of Oyo State. Last week we had indicated that the Oyo State government was proceeding with his plans to demolish the radio station as well as recording studios of Yinka Ayefele, who's a very well-known gospel musician. That threat, of course, was carried out in the early hours of yesterday, and there are pictorial illustrations of that story. Let's take a look at the Punch newspaper, for instance. Punch newspaper, look at the photograph on the front page of the Punch newspaper above the strip advert right at the foot of the front page. It says, outrage as Oyo demolishes Ayefele's 800 million naira radio station and studios. You can see the partially demolished structure there on the left, and the crowds that gathered at the scene yesterday.
We have something similar to that, the picture story too, on The Guardian, on the front page of The Guardian, and it just shows the crowd that are heartbroken by this eventual demolition.
All right, but the stories had said that Yinka Ayefele, of course, and his organization had taken the matter to court. The exact status of the proceedings isn't clear to us now, but of course the matter is in court. It's sub judice, and we do hope that they will seek remedy, but that will be after the fact.
Yes, it would seem that if discussions were held at all, it had broken down to get to this level of demolition. Demolition notice, according to the state government, was passed to Yinka Ayefele and some other organizations on July 16th. And I think that there should have been better ways to resolve this thing than to demolish this kind of structure that puts food on the table of quite a number of people.
All right, let's return to the Punch newspaper. Above the nameplate of Punch newspaper, you have a number of headlines there. Salah, police beef up security nationwide. That's on page 14. And government to shut Third Mainland Bridge from August 23rd to the 26th. 13 states set to adopt new mortgage of the APC, Shiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Details of that story can be found on page 20. Dogara, 6 urgent reforms in the education curriculum, and 252 aides resign from Tambuwa's government. That's on page 12. Now, the lead story is on the appropriation for next year's budget. 2019 post, that's the kicker. Saraki attacks executive, says it lacks foresight. With a rider, Senate President driving Nigeria to the cliff edge. That's according to the presidency. Senator demands audit of National Assembly budget under Saraki. That's page 2. 3,000 have died in Zamfara attacks. And that's according to the secretary to the Zamfara state government. And motorists groan as 470 million naira Niger bridge collapses.
We turn to the leadership that takes as its banner story, prices of food, livestock skyrocket ahead of Salah. And it also talks about the average price of a ram selling at 100,000 and above. And then the lower part of the story, we see political story of PDP winning Taraba by-election. And then another very gladdening one, JTF rescues kidnapped INEC official and 8 others, while the economic story is about the Shippers Council facilitating 13.5 trillion export trade in 2017. That's from leadership.
Okay, let's take a look at the Daily Sun newspaper. Daily Sun, the lead story is on the Saraki and Tambuwa defection and why it occurred, according to Tinubu with a rider. Senate President, not cause of your failure. That's according to lawmakers. Details can be found on page 6. Now, there's an earpiece beside the nameplate. It says, jail threat to looters. Start with your party men, PDP tells Buhari. And a rider there says, President would shield corrupt members. And that's according to the governing APC. Now, below the photograph of rams that you see on the front page there. And by the way, Femi, I've noticed that, the more private residences this year are having rams, around the compound. unlike what we saw in the course of the recession. So the economy is heavier.
I have noticed the same too. And drive around town, you see Hilux vans transferring rams from one place to the other. We didn't see that 2 years, 3 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years, especially in the course of the recession. And the bleat of the sheep is very significant. So we hope, of course, the meat will go around.
Yes.
And we'll all partake of it. So, Ida Kabir, that's the story. Back again to the Daily Sun newspaper. Below the photograph of the rams there, by the way, there are live ones you can see, apart from the ones on the photograph there. Ida Kabir, IGP, that's Inspector General of Police, orders massive deployment of police at worship and recreation centers. Army arrests gun runner and police officer fueling herdsmen farmers clashes. Aborted by-election. Police have declared war on Rivers. That's according to Governor Wike, page 42. Kofi Annan's funeral to be a private event as more tributes pour in.
We turn to Nigerian pilots, and it carries a banner story, Daura Gate, and talks about the issues that make it talk about Daura Gate, the detained DSS boss that is under probe, over 12.9 billion naira allegedly left by his predecessor. And then other stories about security agencies monitoring politicians. Then we move from the Daura Gate story and go up a little bit where something about Idil Kabir and Road Safety Commission deploying 482 regular marshals and 300 special marshals to roads across the country to help marshal traffic to avoid loss of life. Lower part of the front page is the political story of Saraki talking about the budget, and then we also talk about some other smaller stories on the front page, why we slammed the 50 billion naira suit on EFCC by the Akwa Ibom state government, and then the TSA reshaping FCT IGR, that's coming from the Minister of FCT. We also talk about military stories again. Herdsmen kill, soldier injure 2 in Benue. Some of the front page stories on Nigerian pilot.
All right, Femi, we had elections, by-elections at the weekend. One in Taraba appeared to have gone on smoothly, but the one in Rivers, of course, appeared to have also followed a pattern that we have seen in the last couple of years. There was violence and the elections got disrupted. That story is there on the front page of the Daily Sun. It says, aborted by-election, police have declared war on Rivers. That's Wiki. Of course, the APC itself has issued a statement saying, praising the people of Port Harcourt Constituency 3 for defending their votes. So the question is, why has Rivers been, as it were, since after the general elections in 2015, been unable to conduct violence-free elections? And I think it's a very significant development. Ahead of the 2019 elections, all hands must be on deck to ensure that the tinderbox that is Rivers State, of course, is very well taken care of, so that there is no conflagration arising from that location.
It would seem there are special interests in Rivers that we don't see elsewhere. Even before the 2015 general elections, it had always been a hotbed for violence. And I think all hands, to repeat your words, must be on deck to ensure that Rivers is particularly peaceful for the general elections in 2019.
All right, and Femi, another story that's, again, you find it on the front page, of course. The story broke at the weekend of the death of, if you like, the super diplomat, Kofi Annan. He was Secretary General of the United Nations. He passed away at the weekend in Geneva, in Switzerland, where he was based. The Ghanaian diplomat, Kofi Annan, he was 80 years. And, of course, he had some relationship with Nigeria in the sense that his first wife was Nigerian. Kofi Annan wasn't the first African to be named Secretary General of the United Nations. The first was Boutros Ghali from Egypt. But of course, the description is sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay.
Africa is a continent.
That mistake has been peddled.
Yes, it's been peddled. He wasn't the favorite, but Boutros Ghali, and then Kofi Annan. May his soul rest in peace. Of course, coming on the heels also of the passing on of Aretha Franklin. That's the Queen of Soul, who passed away last Thursday at the age of 76. And just before we take the editorial, Femi, there's a story here that, there are two stories, by the way, from the Punch newspaper, and the story is now coming to light. The first column there by the right says 3,000 have died in Zamfara attacks, and that is according to the Secretary to the state government. And this was, of course, during the visit by the Nigerian Bar Association. Why, the Zamfara crisis? This very important question for me. It
is. I want to say that I was on that team that visited Zamfara. Drive around Zamfara townships, the main townships, you just would not know such carnage was taking place in the hinterland. The people are really helpless. The Emir of Zurmi spoke, he received the team, and what happens right into the bushes, into the forest, is unimaginable. But the state government is trying to do something. Indeed, just before we got there, the IGPs were told to move back to their places because of the deployment of the military to some of these areas. And so they moved just a day or so before we got to Zamfara. That's just the situation.
Yeah, and then, of course, the Air Force has deployed some of its platforms and been strafing some of the locations of the bandits. The other story from the Punch newspaper has to do with the temporary closure of the 3rd Mainland Bridge from the 23rd to the 26th. It's a Punch newspaper above the nameplate. Government to shut 3rd Mainland Bridge from August 23rd to the 26th. It's a temporary measure, but I just want, the story doesn't provide sufficient details. Let's find out, maybe the authorities would clarify this. The 3rd Mainland Bridge is the longest bridge in Africa. It begins right from Iyanoworo. I mean, those who are familiar with Lagos, and then if you look at the various interchanges to Adekunle and elsewhere to Adeniji Adele, and moving on to Lafiaji and so on and so forth, you're now asking yourself, which sections of the 3rd Mainland Bridge, the bridge, if you join all the sections together, it's about 22 kilometers right up to Akpongbo. Is it the entire bridge that will be closed from the 23rd to the 26th, or sections of the bridge that will be closed? The bridge has been closed in the past for maintenance, and we do know that during such closures in the past, it was only sections of it, and then you had the traffic control officers managing and monitoring traffic. So which sections of the bridge? Is it the entire bridge, and is it the 2 carriages of the bridge that will be shut during the period? Because
part of the bridge can always be used depending on the area that is closed. But one gladdening thing about the timing of this closure is that it falls on a weekend. It extends from 23rd to 26th, and some part of the days are on a weekend. I have always wondered why work is done, massive work is done, during weeks when people are going to work and all that. And I think that some of this construction should be done in the night when there's less traffic.
All right, Femi, thanks a lot. Let's take a look at the editorial from the Daily Independent, and it's on page 16. It says, INEC's registration of new parties, matters arising. There are now 91 political parties in the country, and the editorial is very clear. It says, in part, that the INEC chairman had reminded the party leaders that the law provides for deregistration of political parties, warning that the law will be vigorously applied whenever the need arises. The Daily Independent says, the list of 91 political parties is too long and can only serve to confuse the electorate. It says, therefore, that the time has come for INEC to review the status of some parties which are mere numbers on the register, having shown no electoral relevance, and for it, that's to say, INEC to do the needful by deregistering such parties before the next election.
The condition for this deregistration would be, for one of them, for instance, is that they should have offices across the country. But there are constitutional limitations that makes it impossible for INEC not to register any party that applies to be registered. But it's also good to see that INEC is trying to enforce those other laws that the parties must comply with even after being registered.
Absolutely, and that's what it's right. So listen, yes. If there are parties that haven't complied with the extant provisions, to register them before the elections, yes. So we don't have a ticker tape as a ballot paper during the 2019 elections. Femi, that's the most that we can take. Let's take a short break now. When we return, of course, we go into our discussion segment, which is how to revive the seaports on the eastern border of the country.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There is no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous, whether you do it for fun or for political gains. Real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
Dettol team is visiting schools to teach children how to protect themselves from diseases. Do you know how we get illnesses like diarrhea, cough, and cold?
No!
They are spread through germs which are everywhere. You collect germs that cause diseases. You pick up germs from any surface, like when you don't wash your hands after going to the toilet, while playing. And then you can get sick because of germs. That's why you need to fight germs to stay healthy by washing your hands and taking your bath with Dettol soap to protect from up to 100.
Every day, wash, wash, wash your hands.
Madam. Brought us as usual.
As usual. You have no problem.
For the three
you are welcome, sir.
As usual, yeah?
Welcome. You take that one. You take that one. You don't understand? We want Nigerian homegrown rice. Finish. You don't have? You don't have?
Join the rice revolution today.
No other rice that tastes like Nigerian rice.
Are you sorry? That's the Nigerian rice we are talking about.
Chocolate made in Nigerian rice. Healthy food.
I'm going to bring Mrs. Mobu to come to chocolate rice of made in Nigeria here. And see how it are made.
Correct.
And how they are cook it.
Correct.
Homegrown rice are good for your health. It will boost our economy and will give employment to our people.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Win a trip to Dubai in the 2018 Three Crowns Mom of the Year promo. Visit www.femininelounge.com/competition to find out more.
3 Crowns Milk. Healthy moms, happy families.
For years, the NTA has been promoting science, technology, arts and crafts under the tagged name National Children's Expo. We are set with another edition as we gather children around Nigeria, junior category ages 6 to 12 and senior category ages 13 to 18. The theme for Expo 2018, achieving self-sufficiency in agriculture, meeting the challenges of security, and exposition of alternative energy as pathways to national development. Date, October 21st to 25th, 2018. Venue, NTA Headquarters Arena, Area 11, Garki, Abuja. We are set to celebrate the best of innovation across the country. For more information, please call the following numbers. NTA ETV, promoting learning.
Nice to have you back with us as we discuss this major topic. But to kickstart the discussion, let's take this background report put together by Mitayare Ikwen.
The Apapa and Tinkan Island ports in Lagos are notorious for congestion and perennial traffic chaos, which often takes a toll on the economy as goods and services are held down or delayed for months without reaching their destinations. While the Lagos ports are overwhelmed by unnecessary congestion, they are not the only maritime gateways in the country. The eastern ports, comprising Calabar, Port Harcourt, Warri, Onne, and Cocoa ports, are either abandoned or underutilized, despite repeated advocacy for their revival and upgrade. Unlike some landlocked countries, Nigeria has the luxury of multiple seaports, but is yet to utilize them to boost national revenue and GDP. Ironically, Nigeria's losses in the maritime industry is the gain of neighboring Benin Republic, as many Nigerian importers who are frustrated by the gridlock in Apapa have long relocated to the neighboring country's port. Maritime reports indicate that Nigeria receives only 10% out of 60% imports meant for her seaports. This means most other imports are diverted to other West African nations who make huge maritime revenues before the goods are redirected to Nigeria through the land borders. How long will Nigeria continue to lose maritime revenue to its neighbors? What is required to revive or upgrade the eastern ports? Experts on Good Morning Nigeria will provide answers shortly.
Thank you very much, Mitayare. And indeed, we have the guests already here with us in the Abuja studios as well as at our Lagos Network Center to discuss the issue in further detail. We'd like to welcome once again to Good Morning Nigeria, Mani Ochugboju, who is a legal practitioner and transport consultant. Mani, pleasure to have you again on the program.
Thank you, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
And joining us from our Lagos Network studios, we would like to welcome, there are three of them there. Anthony Ogadi is Deputy Director and Head of Shipping Development of NIMASA. NIMASA stands for the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency. Anthony Ogadi, pleasure to have you. I'm not quite sure who Anthony is, but I'm sure if you just signal by saying, gentlemen, good to have you. Good to have you.
Very much. Good morning.
Guess possibly Chief Agu Chukwuemeka is the Deputy Director of Compliance, Monitoring and Enforcement of the Nigerian Shippers Council. Chief Agu, are you the one in the red cap? You are. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. Yes, I got right. We also have another guest, also in the Lagos studio, Kayode Farinto Collins, President, Association of Nigeria's Licensed Custom Agents. Welcome to the program, Mr. Kayode.
Right, and by the way, Femi, Kayode is Vice President of the Association of Nigerian Licensed Customs Agents. Okay. Let's begin the conversation with our guests in Lagos. Charity otherwise begins at home, but of course, that's where the seaport is. There's no seaport here in Abuja. So, Mani, we're going to pause you in the meantime. Gentlemen, just explain, to our viewers, beginning, of course, with the NIMASA Deputy Director. The Lagos ports, three of them, roll on, roll off, that's called Roro, Tinkan, and Apapa, and all the congestion issues and matters arising therefrom. People are wondering, Why is it that the ports in Lagos, that's to say the western seaboard in Nigeria, are congested, and in the meantime, several other seaports on the eastern board are fallow? How do you explain this?
Yeah, Kingsley, thank you very much, and good morning, Nigerian. I have the pleasure of being here this morning and on this forum. Actually, what we see of the eastern ports of Calabar, Port Harcourt, and Onne is that these ports are reacting to the dynamics of the global phenomenon called shipping. And with respect to what happens all over the world, shipping is benchmarked globally on the kind of services you're able to provide for those who are indulging in shipping. We have seen over time how the activities of the shipping has moved from onshore to offshore. Offshore terminals, at about a dozen of them, the Borno offshore terminal, Kwaibo, Yoho, Antan, and a host of all of them. And you have to take this, that the economy of any region is predicated on the resources of that region. In this region, we have hydrocarbon and gas, that's the oil and gas. And we did over time see how the emphasis now moved over to the oil and gas sector. And such shipping and port facilities gradually shifted to the offshore locations and the offshore terminals, now leaving the commercial ports of Port Harcourt, Onne, and Calabar not being optimally used. Now, for the fact that the shipping is actually dynamic, we now discover that vessels that cause at these ports cannot be attended to at these ports because they have over time been developed. We no longer have those vessels that come to evacuate coal and agricultural products from the ports of Calabar and Port Harcourt. That is why you now see the port of Onne leading in that region with respect to services being now offered in the area of oil and gas. Onne seaport gives a good example of what the ports in that region should look like, because it services the oil and gas industry. That places the Port Harcourt and Calabar ports at a disadvantaged position because the resources that drives the economy is basically oil and gas. And how has this port been positioned to take charge of these challenges? That is the major reason why you see that the eastern ports are dwindling in their performance.
Now, let me go to the Shippers Council, Chief Agu. And I put a seemingly elementary question to you. At the point of requisition, at the point of making a request for importation, who determines where these imports land? Is it the person who wants to utilize the material? If I want something imported, am I at liberty to insist that my products be brought to Port Harcourt? Who determines where it lands?
Thank you, Kingsley. In terms of who determines where it lands, the importer is the king. However, there's other factors in terms of pricing. And when you look at the landing cost to Lagos port and the landing cost to Port Harcourt port, you discover that it is cheaper to import through Lagos. So any businessman will definitely prefer to make use of the Lagos port. So that's exactly what is playing out. And let me equally add to what my friend from Nemasa has said. You see, there are certain things we need to consider. Let us, first of all, look at a simple definition of a port. You know, it's a collection of physical facilities, you know, and services deserve to serve as an interchange point between the land and sea transport. So the question is that in the Eastern Port, do we have the prerequisite facilities and services? They are not existing. Again, if you look at the Eastern Port, you discover that it has a catchment population of more than 120 million. Look at the entire South-South, the entire Southeast, North Central, part of Cameroon, part of Chad, part of Niger. And yes, the goods are not coming. So it is simply economics playing out. You know, in economics, they say, they might ceteris paribus, all things being equal. So as far as the Eastern ports are concerned, all things are not equal. There is a disconnect. There is a missing link. And it is because of this missing link that you don't see cargo moving to the Port Harcourt port. Ship owners, shippers, they have preference to ports that provide quality service. They have preference to ports that has adequate facilities. They have preference to ports that are secured. On the part of the ship owners, they also take into consideration the draft limitations. Now we are talking of economies of scales. So most of the shipping lines deploy bigger vessels, you know, and if those bigger vessels cannot access your port, definitely you will go to the next port. So the ports within the West African sub-region, they are in competition. Also the ports within Nigeria are equally in competition. So these are some of the, you know, the plays that are coming out of the scene.
All right, thank you very much. Let's also get the comments of Kaude Collins. This is the Vice President of Association of Licensed Customs Agents. Why is this phenomenon intractable, as it were? Lagos ports are busy and choked up. In the meantime, Eastern ports are virtually dry.
Thank you, Kingsley. There are many factors, and some of them have been enumerated by the two speakers. However, there are some technicalities that need to be mentioned. Let us start from like Warri Port. Warri Port has a very, very low draft, not more than 5 meters. And nowadays, in shipping, bigger vessels are called in most of the ports. So also in, what's it called, Calabar Port. Calabar Port too has a very, very low draft. And there's what is called siltation in Calabar Port. And unfortunately, Nigerian Port Authority that will have awarded the dredging of Calabar Port, which has been put in place, has been stalled because of EFCC involvement, and this has not been dredged. And these are many things that are actually causing congestion in Lagos State, because most of the importers now prefer to take their cargo where they can take it on time. We also have a situation where, like Port Harcourt Port, most of the infrastructures have been decayed. We have BAT 5, BAT 4, and BAT 7 that are actually going into extinction. We also have BAT 8 is not working at all. The terminal operator is actually working with between BAT 1 and BAT 3. So these are also additional reasons why it has more than 12 to 13.5 meter draft. But, you know, on being the fact that the kind of cargo that goes to Onne is all related matters. We have WACS, we have Intels that is managing on a port. There is need to actually demonopolize the operation of Intels. Nigerian importers will want their cargo to go to where they can have services cheaper. Intels charge Nigerian importers in dollars, unlike other ports, and this is against the regulation of Nigerian Port Authority and Nigerian Shippers Council. And I know Shippers Council have taken this issue with Intels and many other WACS. So there are a lot of inconveniences here and there why Nigerian importers may not want to take their cargo to an airport. Also, mainly is the issue of freight charges. Freight is very, very high when you want to take your cargo to Eastern Port, unlike Lagos where you have it cheaper. And the issue of insecurity, kidnapping of expatriates, and adoption. So these are many things that the government must look into before we can say Nigerian importers, we should encourage them to divert their cargo to Eastern Port. I personally cannot encourage my importers to go to Eastern Port because I still want them to be in business. But government must be up and doing in providing infrastructure, particularly the issue of road. As we have it, the issue of bad roads in Lagos, so also in the eastern part of this country. And unfortunately, federal government is generating over 5 to 7 billion naira on a daily basis from this port in Lagos Port. But if we can have a situation where this infrastructure will be put in place vis-a-vis road, and the fact that the issue of dredging of most of these ports are taken into cognizance, the issue of like Calabar Port now has been stalled because of EFCC talking about procurement and that the fact that it's not going through the process. All these things need to put in place before we now say, okay, Nigerian importers, why don't you use Eastern Port? And also the fact that the Nigerian Port Authority is collecting 7% of, they call it port dues, in the last 2 decades. This 7% charges is not made available to Nigerian Port Authority. If it is made available to Nigerian Port Authority, then we can now begin to encourage or advise Nigerian Port Authority to make the shipping dues lesser, give vessels that want to go to the Eastern Port, give them discounts so that Nigerian importers can have their cargoes delivered at the Eastern Port of the country.
All right, Dr. Kaide Collins, rather, just before we bring in money, there are some expressions that you gentlemen have used for the benefit of our viewers. You've talked about draft, and explain draft, explain depth for the benefit of our viewers so that they would know why, for instance, a draft is important and why the depth of a port is also important.
About draft or what I know is that I am not an expert in this area, but I know that for a vessel to sail or to call at any port, they look at the depth
of the water channel.
Most of the ocean vessel now, the minimum you can have is 12 meters or thereabout. So if you have a port like a Warri port that is about 5 or 6 meter, definitely that there's no new vessel, ocean vessel that can bat or that can call in such ports. We also have in Calabar Port where the depth of that water is not more than 6 meters, except only in on a port and maybe Port Harcourt Area 1. And Port Harcourt Area 1 has infrastructural decay. So it is the depth of the water that determines which of the vessel that can call into that port.
Government agency has the responsibility to make the debt and draft universal across the Nigerian ports.
Well, it's supposed to be the responsibility of Nigerian Port Authority, but I want you to know that, like I talk about at the Calabar Port, there's what is called siltation. What is siltation? Siltation is a situation where you have fineness of materials that's actually mixed into water. It becomes dirty, it becomes muddy. When you take your vessel to this, you can have a situation where you grind that vessel. So until this area it is done, and that is why we are talking about dredging of these areas. You need to dredge Warri Port. The dredging of Warri Port has been approved. I wouldn't know whether the contractor has gone to site. The dredging of Calabar is stalled. Why was it stalled? The Nigerian Port Authority has done the needful. Unfortunately, but EFCC came in and said that the dredging contract did not go through due process. And since this has been stalled, there's no way the contract can, the Nigerian Port Authority can go ahead and still issue the contract until this issue of interference by the EFCC is actually settled. Whether the contract actually go through due process, I wouldn't know. But we all know that every contract that must be issued must go through due process. However, we also know that Nigerian Port Authority has a procurement department. Every government agency now has procurement department. Before a contract is issued, it must actually have gone through this procurement department. Shippers Council has a procurement department. NIMASA has a procurement department. For NIMASA or Shippers Council to issue any contract out to anybody, it must have been seen to have been, due diligence must have been seen to have been done. So until this issue of draft and depthness of the water is actually done by giving out the contract that our waterways be dredged, then we cannot expect ocean vessels that are bigger vessels to come through Eastern Port.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll return to you in Lagos. Mani, you've listened to the explanations. Let's have your own thoughts.
Kingsley, the views expressed by my colleagues out there are basically correct, but I'm concerned about the assertion that the neglect of the ports in the east is due to demand and supply, and the fact that there is a missing link. My view is that, what is that missing link? The missing link there is governmental regulations, leadership, and the issue of the guide which the government should have provided. One of the issues of the neglect of the Eastern Port is actually historical. It goes back from the Civil War era. And those are some of the issues that the leadership of today will be carrying the can for. In their government is a continuum. The development of the ports it's the responsibility of Nigerian Ports Authority. The issue of draft. We've been talking of draft. Yes, standard draft and depth of a port channel should be about 10, 12, 13, even 14 meters deep. Yes. But for goodness sake, how long does it take to dredge? Nigerian Ports Authority have been in existence from 1958, before Nigeria got independence. Tinkan Island, as a port, was built when the Amada crisis almost dealt with Gowon's regime in 2 years.
It dealt with Gowon's regime.
Thank you, sir. It dealt with Gowon's regime in 2 years. So you see how critical port management can be, even to the survival of a regime. Gowon can attest to that. When Obasanjo came, and what's his name, Babangida came, they all had the opportunity of redeeming those ports in the east, but they turned a blind eye. We've had leaders in Nigerian Ports Authority like issues we cannot run away from. It's a failure of leadership that has to be redeemed. And the fact that we are raising this issue now, largely preempted by the fact that the Lagos model of covering 80% of our cargo is no longer sustainable. It's making us look at the east now. Lagos is going to collapse on us. And if Lagos collapses on us, what are we going to do? It also shows that we are not even planning for the future. Nigerian ports should not be thinking of just the hinterland. We should be thinking of our neighbors. Our neighbors are not just those landlocked countries like Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali. No. Even Cameroon, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, and Central African Republic. We should be thinking ahead. We are not thinking ahead in the management and development of our ports. The Eastern Ports draft could have been dealt with long ago. There is this allegation that the Obasanjo regime gave a contract of $56 million to some Dutch countries, some Dutch companies. Yes, Dutch, foreign companies, and they have the audacity to point fingers at Nigerians. And they just walked away. They didn't do no dredging. And as they didn't do no dredging, this is a part of why the EFCC are there in Calabar Port. And there are equipments there rotting away in Calabar. There are people with scanning equipments that don't even use it. They use less than 4% of the scanning capacity of those ports in Calabar. And it is an extreme waste on the economy. Lastly, sir, the issue of the neglect of the Eastern Port, besides leadership, is also a failure of the concession. What happened about the razzmatazz about concessioning the ports, bringing in private sector? Where is the private sector expertise? The technical, financial representations they made? What did they sell to Nigerians? They sold us a dummy. If Eastern ports are not working, the concessionaires, all of them, not just Intel, all of them who are operators of terminals need to look at themselves in the mirror and tell themselves on home truths. They told us that imports will reduce, port charges will reduce, handling of cargo will quadruple when they were concessioning, when they were all bidding. What has happened? Nothing. And if nothing has happened, my view is review all those concessions. Some of them are reaching their terminal stage now. In the next 3, 4, 5 years, some of them, revoke them, bring new people, and let's have benchmarks. And besides, this issue of freight, yes, freight is an issue, but freight is a regulatory matter. You can reduce costs for ships. You can reduce costs for harbor charges. You can make it cheap in the East. After all, when Nigerian Ports Authority had a monopoly, they gave 30% discount on some cases for them. And all of these are issues of utter neglect and bad management that can be reviewed and set aright. And unfortunately for Hajia Hadiza, it is now her responsibility to deal with this mess that she has inherited.
Is it possible for for the Nigerian government to stop the bringing in of imported goods from countries like ports like Cotonou, so as to compel our shippers to deal with our own situation? Because it's like we have an easy alternative. in our neighborhood, even though you also alluded to the fact that our coastline or our shipping processes should also look beyond the Nigerian situation. It should look at us taking care of other West African countries. But for now, everybody seems to jump into Lagos or jump to the neighboring countries as an alternative. Is it part of a responsibility of a government to say, okay, we want to depend wholly on our own situation?
I think on that ECOWAS protocol, it will be difficult to restrict the movement of goods along the West African coasts. But Nigerian government and NTA in particular can make ease of shipping, ease of doing business a reality. Let it not just be a propaganda talk that Nigeria is climbing up on the ease of doing business. If ease of doing business means that you cannot take your goods to Lagos and come and turn around at a good time, ships entering Lagos spend nearly 30 days entering Lagos. Turnaround time, average global turnaround time is 2-3 days. You enter a berth, boom, you offload, you bunker, you do your U-turn, you go. In Lagos, you wait. 2 weeks you're waiting.
So it's not just the trailers, it's not just the freight.
There are ships there too. They are causing congestion. That also add to the cost of shipping in Nigeria. Hence, people go to Cotonou and Côte d'Ivoire. And by the way, Ghana is also emerging as a competition to Nigeria. And all of this is unnecessary. If the Eastern ports were efficient, totally unnecessary. And this colossal loss of business is the fault of Nigerian Ports Authority and the historical leaders up to now.
Mani, thank you very much. There are a number of points that you have raised. You talked about the concession and the challenges arising therefrom. I would like to inform our viewers that ahead of this program, we had invited the officials of the Bureau of Public Enterprises, of course, which handles issues relating to privatization and concession. And they said they were going to be available. But this morning, they aren't here. We also understand that the officer who was in charge has recently retired. We do not know whether the department has been scrapped. And that's why no official is present. Now, with regard to the contract awarded by the Obasanjo regime or Obasanjo administration, we don't have the details, so we can't proceed with that. And Mani, you also say ease of doing business, propaganda, otherwise no. Ease of doing business is reality. But you have put down a new phrase. Part of ease of doing business should also be ease of shipping. Mani, thanks a lot. Let's go over to our Lagos Network Center and then pop the question to our other three guests there. Perhaps other than the on the ports, has concession of the seaports on the eastern board failed? Gentlemen, take it one after the other, beginning with the Deputy Director of the MASA.
Thank you, Kingsley. Actually, all the ports in the eastern port area have been concessioned. Both the Port Harcourt port, the Calabar port. The issue is that the on-air port initiative, and Intel was first to be there, and Intel built it the way a conventional international port should look like. Give it to on-air port. But the other ports were now joined the concession process when government came in. And that is why it is extremely difficult for the Port Harcourt port and the Calabar port to do a kind of catch-up with respect to the status which on-air port has attained. On-air's development started from the scratch, and they had a well-articulated process of development. And they were developing in stages. If you're aware of the ocean liner terminal there in on-air, you see that it's a radical departure from the Federal Lighter Terminal. And they gave room for future expansion. And they brought to bear there what it takes to have port operations in place. And it is a model that even the Lagos ports should copy. So coming back to Port Harcourt port and on the Calabar port, we feel that a model is already created by the efficiency that is being deployed at the on-air port to come to bear with other ports. Like our friend in Abuja has stated, all ports must be competitive. Shipping is a global phenomenon. It is not only restricted to Nigeria. The ship owner, the consignee, that's the owner of the cargo, wants his cargo or wants his vessel to go to a port where he will quickly alongside, discharge under few hours, and cast away. And in that respect, he saves costs and meets up with other obligations along his route. What does Port Harcourt Port offer in this respect in terms of port equipment to deliver in that respect? If you go there, they are so mundane, they are not modern, they can't even attend to modern vessels that are now plying the routes of the ocean. So also with Calabar Port. So, but if you go to an airport, you see this equipment and the processes of operating a vessel is quite apt there compared to all these other ports. And what does a ship owner want? Service. What does a receiver want? Service. But like what my colleague here has said, that the cost of doing a business on an airport is a bit astronomical. Noted, because since they are providing these services, it behoves on them that they must recover their cost of running business there. So what do? We are expecting that in the long run, when these services are well provided and there is this attraction to an airport, the cost of the import in an airport will come down. And if the likes of Port Harcourt Port and Calabar Port in the region becomes technically competitive, then Intel's monopoly on high charges will drop. So this is my take on this.
It would, we don't have the ideals we are all looking at now. What is of interest to this program is what do we do to create this ideal? It would seem as if it's from the answers we are getting, it's always almost a helpless situation. But we also have heard that the logjam we are seeing in freighting on the hinterland is also available onshore. The ships are getting the same problems. And yet, you keep saying the shippers want the easiest environment to bathe. But then, the present environment in Lagos is not really yet the ideal, even though it may be better than Port Harcourt, Onne, and Calabar. How do we create that kind of environment for the alternatives we have? Let the Shippers Council man take this question, please.
Thank you, Kingsley. Yes, you see, the reason the high patronage of Lagos Port is a question of when there is no variable, then the alternative becomes the preferable. However, there is a lot of things that both the government and the private sector need to do. And we should equally take a cue from the neighboring ports. If you go to Cotonou Port, it's fully automated in terms of port operation and clearing procedure. So a single window system is working in Cotonou. Before the establishment of single window in Cotonou, cargo dwell time was more than 30 days. Now it has crashed down to less than 10 days. The port of Lomé, single window is equally working. Before the establishment of single window in port of Lomé, cargo dwell time was more than 30 days. Now it is 3 days. So definitely, if we want to move forward, there is the need to bring the element of automation in our port system. Even the gridlock in the Lagos port, automation has the capacity to eliminate the gridlock. The truth of the fact is that we all know that human-to-human contacts bring corruption. So why can't we automate? Are we afraid as a country to automate? Look at the banking sector. What automation has brought in the banking sector. You can stay in the comfort of your room and do your transaction. Even midnight, if you want cash, you go to ATM, and withdraw money without going to the bank. So it is the same thing. If you go to the Lagos port, you discover that you think that is a marketplace. But if you automate, people will stay in the comfort of their room and transact. They don't need to come there. So the most important thing is that we should lay emphasis on automation. Then secondly, again, the issue of trade facilitation. All countries are laying emphasis on trade facilitation. But here in Nigeria, emphasis is on revenue generation. And that is what is causing the problem. But the truth of the fact is that when you emphasize on trace facilitation, the efficiency gain will even more, will be more. I will give you a typical example. When the Cotonou port embraced the single window system, revenue jumped up by 39%. And I believe that if we automate here, revenue will equally go up. Then for the Eastern port, the issue of security is germane. There is no ship owner that will take his vessel, to an area that is not secure. So we must secure the water channel. We must secure the port approaches, the port waterfront. It's very, very important. The truth of the
security agencies.
Yeah, thank you, Kingsley. With respect to maritime safety and security, which is a statutory responsibility of the agency, that's the MASA. MASA has gone far in trying to see what they can do. It's still a learning curve. We have gone into an MOU with the Nigerian Navy to form the Maritime Guard Command, which is like the enforcement arm and the security arm of the agency, because NIMASA is not, we don't bear arms. So we need to subject that to the Nigerian Navy. And the composition of the Maritime Guard Command, which is headed by a captain in Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, comprises of the detachment of the Air Force, Nigerian Police, and Civil Defense. So, but the Nigerian Navy leads that with respect to NIMASA directing. So what we've done so far is to see how we can have an eagle eye on our maritime domain by having an apt satellite surveillance, which can reach out to our economic zone, beyond our economic zone. And the facility we have now goes beyond our economic zone, that up to 312 nautical miles of our economic exclusive zone. So this gives us the impetus to see what is actually obtainable there, because if you cannot see, you can't engage. So we have a 24-hour surveillance now, and we have been able to acquire about 5 fast intervention boats now, which is grossly inadequate. And these boats have been deployed to the various operational zones of the NIMASA, the Western Zone, the Eastern Zone, and the Central Zone. And the Eastern Zone, which is of concern to us now, has over time been the major problem, which my friend here in Shippers Council has alluded, that has led to this war risk clause that has been enshrined into our importation processes. And that has actually skyrocketed the price of doing business in the Eastern ports because of the security challenge. But to take this once and for all, the Office of National Security Advisor, in conjunction with the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Transportation, have now inaugurated an implementation committee to ensure that the contract awarded, which is a huge one, about $195 million, to have a security architecture conceived for the Eastern port in particular, whereby all the security arms, all the security forces will be there, and NIMASA will be giving it a civil touch to make sure that we adhere and abide with international regulations when it comes to maritime safety and security. So that is where we are, and this project in the next 2 years maximum will be delivered because we are at the implementation stage now. It has to do with both deployment of equipment, crafts, both for the air and the amphibious and the land, and then the NIMASA will actually regulate. And it has to do with some training of personnel to make sure that everybody buys into this project. Because if we don't, we are not able to do this for the maritime industry, it will be very difficult for us to secure the area. But that is in the short run. In the long run, we feel that the major issue is to engage the restive hands. And that is making them employable, making them key into the maritime industry, making them realize that they have a future in the maritime industry, to make sure that they are well trained and they can be absorbed into the industry to play their role. So this is the way NIMASA is taking it so far. We have the National Shipfarers Development Program. This is a program which is in conjunction with the states, all the states in the Federation, to train youngsters, to train seafarers to be able to, and to train manpower for the maritime industry. So we are looking forward that when all these processes come to play, the restiveness and insecurity in the Eastern ports will be reduced optimally. Thank you.
More into these issues when we come back. For now, let's take a break and then we'll be back.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. But only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria, unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Helen!
Your kitchen gets 10 out of 10.
Thank you.
This also gets a 10. Should we see the toilet now?
Sure.
This gets just 1.
It is clean.
But not perfect 10.
Better than
But not perfect 10.
Better than my detergent and bleach? Impossible.
Challenge? Try the new Apic 10X. Compared to bleach and detergent, Apic sticker formulation removes yellow stains times better, giving you a sparkling clean toilet.
Wow.
Now you also take that
Apic 10X challenge.
Also available in 200 ml pack.
Why don't you people sell imported materials here?
Welcome,
As beautiful as the shop is. Auntie. Buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality. Really? And to make Nigeria great again. That is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me. I'm convinced. Change begins with me too! Huh? Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, and we're reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We, of course, are still on our topic on how to revive the seaports on the eastern border of the country, and to put it simply, ease of shipping is right here on the table. We still have all our guests in Lagos and with us here in the Abuja studios, plus reactions by way of tweets that have come in using our Twitter handle. You can see there at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. Femi, let's take the tweets right away.
Okay, Mike Anyaku says, thanks NTA, Good Morning Nigeria, for bringing this important matter for discussion. The first impediment is total neglect of the Southeast by successful governments in Nigeria. The other reasons are lack of political will by politicians from the eastern states and bad governance.
And Mike Ayonko continues, says, revival of Eastern ports will go a long way in boosting the economy. Now, many Easterners, being predominantly traders, will be contributing positively to the revenue of government. Local industries will also spring up as a result of linkage effects. Unemployment will be reduced drastically.
Daily Jack Solomon says, the main problem with these eastern ports is that the river channels leading to them are too narrow. The channels into these ports need to be dredged, while their facilities need to be upgraded and incentives should be provided to enable them to take up more of the nation's maritime business.
Godwin Johnson, I do not see why ports all over the country are not working. Lagos isn't the only state in the country with a port. Now, others should be revived to create room for more employment.
Dominic Obemene says the reason for neglect of the eastern ports is not far-fetched, and that is lack of political will from the federal and state governments. Former President Yar'Adua would have achieved that, if not for his demise. Our leaders lack appropriate vision.
Festus Akimboyewa, inconsistent government policies, importers and shipping companies and traders are one way or the others hindering the revival and upgrade of the eastern seaports. Government should give shipping companies and traders attractive incentives to use the eastern seaports.
And from Big Dude, upgrade of the eastern ports is exactly what the legislators from the part of the country should be fighting for.
Among Bolahan says the Apapa gridlock in Lagos today is largely due to congestion occasioned by visionless leadership. If other seaports like Onne and Warri had been put to optimal use, by the way, Onne is up and running. You're not talking about Warri, Port Harcourt, and Calabar and Koko, and the Onitsha port had been completed, now things would have been much better.
Still from Omogbonahon, way forward, he says, governments across board must show the political will and follow same with actionable plans that will see it manifest. Such move is in the interest of the society. Imagine if the second Niger Bridge project is completed and it is followed by construction of the Onitsha Seaport.
Onitsha Seaport has been constructed. It's just to get it operational. Now, Dele Jack Solomon has this tweet. Now, we must fix the eastern seaports now or never. This malaise, which has been going on for many years, is exerting a heavy toll on the roads and bridges, especially in Lagos. There can't be meaningful economic and social progress in Nigeria without
serve as an impetus to economic growth and development in any country where they are found. However, lack of vision, direction, and political will on the part of our leaders have kept this aspect of our economy in moribund shape. We need visionary leaders to address this.
Ortega tweets, Nigeria badly needs more seaports. We have Gelegele Seaport in Edo State the Edo State governor is already taking the lead in getting private developers to work on the Gile Gile port. That's where the Portuguese first landed in Benin Kingdom in the 15th century. There's also Warri Seaport in Delta and others. Now, if all our seaports are developed, Nigeria's economy will be more attractive to the world.
From Delhi, Jack Solomon, we have asked that question. We would ask again, but he says, please ask our guest why the huge amount spent on capital dredging at the Calabar port is not commensurate with the amount on maintenance dredging, and why is the maintenance dredging exercise unnecessarily delayed?
Ibrahim Jibril, now the will of government to make use of the eastern seaports is vague. Otherwise, I don't see why we should be happy with 10% as against 60%. Let there be sincerity of purpose at the Nigerian Ports Authority in particular. Cecilia
Okoroma, why should a port in Nigeria be charging for services in dollars? Where is the naira?
Olowokere Olajide tweets, it is necessary for the government, that's to say the federal government, to partner with state governors in the east to develop their ports. Now, those are the tweets that we have. And Femi, there's that question there with regard to dredging. Mane, I would like you to speak to the issue of dredging, because it's been talked about the low draft, that's the low depth of the channels leading to Calabar and Warri in particular. Not much has been said of Cocoa. Cocoa, of course, was the location where you had a toxic waste that dumped in the country 30 years ago. So what is it with the challenge with dredging? Dredging is not a once and for all thing. There are two stages: capital dredging and maintenance dredging. If there is citation, you have to dredge. So why do we appear to have that challenge with effective dredging of the eastern seaports?
Obviously, the issue of dredging is cardinal to the failure of using the eastern ports. Because yes, it's true, the drafts are low to the various ports. That's true. The average in the eastern ports is about 7 to 8 meter deep, while you need about 12, 13 average for big seafaring vehicles and vessels to enter. However, in the last 30 years, contracts for dredging have been given repeatedly. 30 years, from the days of Gowon and back, they've been giving contracts for dredging. The issue is, where is the performance of those contracts? And the key thing we have to address is, there is no way we are going to revive eastern ports if we don't deal with the issue of dredging, the abuses, attendant abuses that have been occurring regarding the contracts for dredging. And the issue, as we have to address and agree, is that it has become an ATM machine for a large part of the leadership before now. Oh yes, with due respect to Hajia Hadiza, she has the courage to raise alarm about Calabar particularly and a few other dredging contracts. But that's not good enough. We must exercise the political will to flash light on the previous dredging contracts and deal with it and draw the line there. And if we are going to issue new dredging contracts, I will recommend, with due respect, that such contracts should be linked to maybe an international funding like African Development Bank, where there will be a performance-based maintenance, PMB, where it will be monitored by other foreign lenders who will be involved, so that they will bring their expertise, they will bring their training, and they will bring their supervisory devices in place. You give dredging. Dredging is a recurrent thing, like you rightly said, the maintenance one and the capital one. The capital one for now is what we need for the eastern ports, so that the big vessels can come in. And as far as we neglect the dredging, then those ports in Calabar, those ports in Warri, those ports in Port Harcourt, besides One, because of oil and gas, of course, it's well dredged. But again, the freight being charged, those vessels in One, should not be extended to shippers in Calabar and Port Harcourt and Warri. The freights, the harbor fees, the harbor rates, the ship rates, those are within the domain of A 20-feet container shipped from New York to Lagos is nearly $6,000. The same 20-feet container shipped to Cape Town in South Africa is $2,500. It is outrageous. It is extortionate.
Yes.
It is the attitude of shipping lines towards Nigeria generally. And those are issues that we also have to look at. Besides the failure of Nigerian Ports Authority, we also have to look at the attitude of foreign shipping lines towards Nigeria. Their attitude is conspiratorial. Their attitude is extortionate. And it is wrong. And they add to the underdevelopment we are discussing today. So we can't just be talking about underdevelopment and neglect of eastern ports in Nigeria and just looking at the leadership of Nigeria alone. The multinational corporations are complicit in all of this backwardness. They are also to be blamed.
Money. Let's pause you. Chief Ago of the Nigerian Shippers Council would like you to respond to this. I mean, you heard what Money said in terms of the discriminatory freight that, say, from Lagos to New York. It's just the same thing actually you find, you know, with the airlines. You know, the cost of flying, the same length of time from Nigeria to somewhere in Europe.
Well, in shipping, there is what we call connectivity. If your port is well connected, then the freight rate will be cheaper. He gave example with South Africa. South Africa received larger vessels. You know, I mentioned the economies of scale. If you use a vessel that can carry up to 18,000 containers to move cargo from US to South Africa, definitely is going to be cheaper. When we now use smaller vessels. And some of these vessels, they don't even come direct to Nigeria. These vessels will first of all call to Lome Port. Lome is now the hub for West and Central Africa because it can receive vessels carrying up to 13,000 containers, Lome Port. So they will first of all take your cargo to Lome Port, do a transshipment to Lagos Port, and these are all costs. So that once your ports are more connected, definitely the freight charges will be lower. So we should make effort, and that is the more reason why you see Nigeria making effort to come up with new ports that have the capacity to receive bigger vessels. So that's the major challenge. It's not only for Nigeria; it's meant for all other countries. You know that their ports cannot receive bigger vessels. Even in terms of Port Harcourt Port, you know the issue of dredgings. Yes, the problem is there. But I'm telling you that once if you provide security within the channel, definitely it can serve as a spoke port. All ports must not be hub ports. You know, there's what we call hub and spoke port. So big vessels will come to a particular port, then they use smaller vessels to move cargoes to the smaller ports that with lower channels. So these are some of the things we need to put in place to ensure, you know, that there are lesser costs, you know, in terms of freight payment, in terms of cargo clearance. Then another thing we have to take into consideration is equally the port cost. We have to compare the port cost. What is the port cost in Nigeria? What is the port cost in South Africa? Because if a ship owner now comes to the Lagos port and pay a higher port dues, definitely is going to recover his cost. So these are some of the things that we have to, you know,